I think, as you said, Ian, the topic is indeed important at this moment, and I think that the organisation of the webinar comes at a very timely moment. We have now the first work programmes of Horizon Europe adopted, and indeed the information days for those work programmes are happening at this moment as we're meeting today. Secondly, we have just seen the launch of the Conference on the Future of Europe, a major exercise of engagement with citizens on the future that they envision for Europe under the joint presidency of the European Parliament, European Commission, and the presidency of the Council. And we're very hopeful that the ideas out of that will provide food for thought that will feed into the mandate for the second half of the current Commission. So indeed, as you said, Ian, in that regard, my intervention today will focus on a future vision for manufacturing, and a future that very much sees Europe building on its strengths to be in the vanguard of that. Because ever since the dawn of the first industrial revolution, industry has been the engine of European prosperity. And over the centuries, industrial development has had a tremendous impact on the evolution of European society. And this has in no small way been thanks to the capacity of European industry to adapt and to innovate. As we know, currently innovation is happening at an ever increasing rate, and there's a clear view that innovation will continue to accelerate. So to keep up with that, industry needs to capitalize on this rapid innovation in order to stay competitive. And it's in that regard that we're looking ahead. And as you said, Ian, the COVID pandemic induces a new element. It has highlighted that now more than ever, we need to invest more in the future to overcome the challenges of COVID. I think it's important to recognize also that COVID is not a reason to slow down on the transition to a more competitive, sustainable, and resilient industry. I mean, in fact, it's quite the opposite. It should be the impetus for us to redouble our efforts in that direction. So you referred to the digital and indeed also the green transition, and these twin transitions present both a challenge and an opportunity for Europe. We need new technologies for the time ahead, but supported by appropriate investment and innovation. At European level, we have a variety of instruments to make this happen. Horizon Europe, as we know, and also the Next Generation EU programme, which brings together investments at national level and European level. These provide funding to support investment. Also, the renewed European Research Area initiative is aiming specifically at diffusion of new technologies in a way that benefits the economy and wider society. But at European level, we believe, to go further and to complement the instruments with a clear vision for what the future of European industry should be. And this vision should put industry at the center of economic and social activity. And this reflects our very strong view that industry has potential to achieve societal goals that go beyond jobs and growth. In essence, what we're talking about is industry becoming a resilient provider of prosperity, ensuring, first of all, that production reflects the boundaries of our planet. Secondly, placing the well-being of the industrial worker at the center of the production process. And thirdly, and COVID has highlighted this, equipping industry with the resilience to tackle unpredictable events, such as a pandemic. And this is where the concept of Industry 5.0 comes in. It builds on Industry 4.0 by giving the lead role to research and innovation in driving this transition to a sustainable, human-centric, and resilient European industry. Let me just move to the next slide. When we talk about Industry 4.0, we're reflecting on something that has captured Europe's innovative capacity for applying ever more advanced digital technologies. Sensor technologies, big data, and AI are increasingly automating, interconnecting, and optimizing industrial processes. And this will continue to accelerate. But at the same time, the way Industry 4.0 has evolved, it is primarily a techno-economic vision. It has been excellent at indicating how general technological advancements will be brought to bear on industrial value chains and how they will change industry's economic position. But we must recognize that Industry 4.0 is also having a transformational effect on society, and in particular on industrial workers. I think we need to reflect further on what its impact will be in that regard. Will workers be attracted to work in the high-tech environment? Will it lead to worker empowerment? And what about the impact of increased automation on the societal role of industry as an employer and as an engine of prosperity? So it's really from that perspective that we have identified the need for Industry 5.0. Industry 5.0 should not be seen as a chronological continuation or an alternative to Industry 4.0, but as a complement. Where Industry 4.0 focuses primarily on digitalization and AI-driven technologies to increase efficiency and flexibility of production, Industry 5.0 focuses on the importance of research and innovation to support industry in its long-term service to respecting planetary boundaries. So let's be clear, in that sense, Industry 5.0 is an evolution. It's not another industrial revolution in relation to Industry 4.0. It focuses on the three central elements: human centricity, in order to promote talents, to encourage human development in the workplace, to support diversity, and to make jobs in industry more attractive, more challenging, and more empowering. Secondly, it is about industry being more resilient. And we've seen a lot of the challenge presented in that regard recently in the current situation of COVID. Industry needs to be agile and to adapt to sudden changes. And in a world of rapid innovation, we're likely to see these changes happening at an ever more rapid speed. And it needs to be resilient in terms of being able to be flexible and adaptable with regard to application of technologies, with regard to adaptability of value chains. And thirdly, it needs to be sustainable. Sustainable certainly in the sense of respecting planetary boundaries, but also sustainable in the wider sense of ensuring that industry is building for the long term, if you like, building for stakeholder value more than for shareholder value. So this is where Industry 5.0 comes in terms of its contribution to wider society by becoming a resilient provider of prosperity, by making production respect boundaries of the planet, and by placing the well-being of the industrial worker at the center of the production process, as an investment rather than a cost. I think in that regard, again, COVID brings home the need to focus even more on this. It has highlighted the fragility of strategic value chains, particularly in the global marketplace where we are today, and also the need to rethink existing working methods. So why do we think Industry 5.0 is the way to go in Europe? I think a lot of it has got to do with the fact that it capitalizes on the European social model. It can lead to improved safety and well-being in the workplace because it engages the worker in the actual process of their job. It should lead to reduced costs by seeing greater resource efficiency as a benefit for an industry, not a burden. It can play an important role in how companies function by empowering workers so that they can contribute to the design of their jobs, and in that way attract higher skilled people into manufacturing. Because let's face it, in the modern world, there are other sectors which are competing strongly for the best and most highly skilled people. And in this regard, we can also help the competitiveness of industry by having the best talent available. It also has implications for the way in which training is done. The traditional model of education, early training, and then work needs to be adapted. We're going in the world we're looking to in the future of rapid innovation. Workers will need to be going through lifelong learning, on-the-job training, evolving skills, upskilling, reskilling, and so on. Well, we believe very much that if we can get this right, then this can give us a competitive edge in the new markets, new sectors, new geographic markets. So in essence, for us, Industry 5.0 complements Industry 4.0 by being a solution provider for people and also for our planet. What we see essentially is that the focus in Industry 5.0 moves from being primarily technology-driven to a human-centric approach that embraces all those involved in manufacturing companies. We see it as also encouraging a focus on the well-being of the worker in terms of the worker being an investment, and this leads to safer jobs, but also higher quality jobs. And very importantly, we see technology being put to work to enhance workers' capacities so that they contribute to the value added of the company, and also opening up the scope for creativity, which can start on the shop floor just as anywhere else in the company. We also see this approach as helping industry to attract the best. In the digital age, those with the skills that are needed are quite scarce. And it is not simply about the salary that's on offer. Young people, the new generation coming forward, also want to work in an environment where the employer shares their values, and where they see that they will have the opportunities to develop their skills, develop their know-how, and get something back. In terms of the sustainability dimension, with resource efficiency, we're not talking about cutting back as we see it, but rather doing better with less. We see the need to adopt a full product life cycle perspective, sustainable by design, being built into the whole process within manufacturing industry. and that contributes to the wider societal goals of, in relation to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, particularly the goals in relation to industry, innovation, and infrastructure, and also in relation to responsible consumption and production. What's quite challenging about Industry 5.0 is that it will require coordinated commitment and concrete action right across the range of policies. In other words, joined up policy thinking. It's not something that in the research and innovation area on our own we can achieve Industry 5.0. On the environmental side, we need support for industrial waste prevention, to ensure that secondary material markets are there that allow recycling, upcycling, and full products life cycle utilization. We need to focus on how technologies can support the human-centric approach. Education, we need to look as broadly as possible at how we can engage all those who have skills and how they can continue to develop those skills. Engagement of all in society, also looking at how entrepreneurial skills can be capitalized on in the larger industrial setting. We also need to look at the employment implications. This has implications for how labor markets will function. It has implications for skills strategies. It has implications for the way in which our social security systems work. It also has, in the European context, a very clear regional dimension. Industry 5.0 must be applied in a way that allows outerlying regions, regions that are in the course of development, to benefit just as much as central high value added regions. And lastly, we need to look at our taxation systems. We need to focus on how these tax policies can promote greener, human-centric industry. And I think, just to give you one illustration, this week, for the first time, the College of Commissioners adopted a communication with a specific reference to Industry 5.0. And that did not come in the research and innovation area. It came in the area of workplace health and safety. So we're already seeing the breadth of engagement in other policy areas that is beginning to happen, that is beginning to see us move towards making Industry 5.0 a reality. Other examples of actions that we're beginning to see is fellowships between in factories and testing infrastructures, exchanges between research and industry, and very importantly also industry identifying what it needs from the research community, what it needs from universities. So the traditional research industry flow also going in the other direction. Through the European Institute of Technology, where there is now a kick on manufacturing, we're looking with them to how to develop curricula focused on the priorities of Industry 5.0. We're also working very closely with industry partners to bring together those who are willing to move in this direction. And in that regard, we're now quite advanced stage of talking to our colleagues in the ManaFuture European Technology Platform about a prize which will shine a light on companies that have the best Industry 5.0 business cases. So maybe I'll stop there, and looking forward very much to the rest of the webinar and to the discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sean, and thank you for this very comprehensive overview and for helping us to not just join the dots, but maybe understand the dots. And I think this is vastly important. And of course, I would welcome the linkage with the SDGs, since this is a very eloquent narrative in terms of global policy making, and you've rightly hit on a number of specific SDGs. And I think this is a very, very smart way to advance this comprehensive policy discussion. So thanks indeed. And likewise, I'm looking for the discussion as we move ahead. I'd now like to go to Matt Moran at IBEC in Dublin. We're delighted to have him available this morning. Matt, you're very welcome. You're an hour ahead, behind rather, excuse me.
An hour behind. I'm always an hour behind.
Yeah. You are very welcome as always, Matt. So please, the screen is yours.
Sure, yeah, and apologies, I'll need to leave in about 15 minutes, Declan.
Understood.
But firstly, Sean, thanks. That was a fascinating presentation. And I think it really highlighted the role of 5.0, but also the role of industry or manufacturing industry for Europe and its citizens in the future. And I mean, I'm involved in biopharma manufacturing, biotech, so on and so forth. And in our view, I agree with your point. I think COVID-19 and the pandemic has provided an impetus to industry in Europe to, I think, respond to a number of challenges which have probably been, I suppose, in the background for some time. I think in its, I suppose, sharpest form, very quickly, the pandemic highlighted problems with supply chains for pharmaceuticals, and we did see shortages emerge very quickly. And many of these were associated with the fact that our supply chains were scattered, complicated, and often located outside the European area or the European Union. And I think one of the first conclusions that we arrived at, and this is through my own work, through the European Fine Chemicals Group of CEFIC, and also through Europa Bio, both in API manufacturing and biomanufacturing, was the need to look at, I suppose, bolstering the European manufacturing infrastructure significantly. And that manifests itself in different forms, such as reshoring of API manufacturing and looking at developing the manufacture of advanced therapeutics, so on and so forth. But I think that the message is fairly clear. Now, for some time in Ireland, we've been working within Opharma in the area of biopharma or Factory 4.0, and we run a number of events, or they run events which we've supported. And it's clear to us that in order to sustain a large manufacturing sector in Ireland, we need to look at transforming that sector. And 4.0 or digitization is a fairly obvious route to that. And in order for us to, I think, sustain this manufacturing base, and this applies to Europe as well as Ireland, we need to rapidly start to move companies through that space into a more, I suppose, digitally transformed situation. Then obviously the European Commission published its Green Deal, and we saw sustainability very quickly come to the center as being, I think, a critical, I think, component to society and industry being able to exist together and move into the future. And this resulted in 4.0 becoming 5.0. So we've been working for some time in Ireland. We have a lighthouse project, which is supported by Pharma and a number of pharmaceutical companies, led out actually by J&J, looking at how we can transform the biomanufacturing industrial base in Ireland to what we would call a 5.0 ready situation. And to that end, Pharma have been working with a number of sites in Ireland to, one, assess their maturity within the context of achieving the 5.0 goal, and secondly, then designing a roadmap which could take these companies along that journey and make sure that they were 5.0 ready into the future. This is a project which we've had a lot of support from a number of major manufacturers in Ireland, not just in the pharmaceutical sector. We've also partners from the technology sector and supporting sectors to look at through a true convergence, I think, of life sciences and tech-based industry, could we achieve a new vision for manufacturing in Europe? And we think that this concept or this theme has, I think, significant potential application within the entire European Union. And we would be keen to, I think, move this forward onto a European platform or a European scale when we're looking to develop this out. There is no doubt there is not a level playing field for manufacturing in the world at the moment. And when we talk about sustainability or even bringing people to the center of the manufacturing process, this is not happening everywhere else in the world. And I think Europe has an opportunity to take a leadership role here and to bring the person, to bring society and bring environment back to the very center of what we do, which is in our case, make medicines for people, but for all industry, making products which we hope makes the world and Europe a better place to live in. So this is a chance for Europe to take leadership. I think it's been laid before us in the various policy initiatives coming out of Brussels at the moment, whether that be anything from the European pharmaceutical strategy to the industrial strategy to the Green Deal. I think the levers are there. And I think that Sean very eloquently and elegantly has expressed this. And what struck me about his presentation was to see a concept such as 5.0 manifesting itself in other key policy areas within, I suppose, Europe at the moment, whether that be health and safety legislation or environmental legislation. And obviously, circularity is going to be, I think, a key component to all we do within industry at the moment. So how we can be more efficient, more clever, and I think more sustainable in how we operate. It's critical. If we don't do it, I think the future of our industry will be in doubt. So I think it's an imperative. And I think that this concept of 5.0 and our work and the European Commission's work and that should be a real calling card for us all. So I'm delighted to be here today. And again, fascinated with that presentation. I think it really has brought the importance of that concept to the center. And I look forward with Ian and with all colleagues to working on this project into the future and onwards and upwards. And let's see what we can do. Thanks, Declan. Thanks, Ian.
Thanks, Matt.
Here's a comment.
Thanks indeed, Matt. Thank you. Wonderful observations. And looking forward now to hearing from Professor Ian Jones. And I suppose just by way of sort of my brief observation, and I thank Sean and Matt for addressing what I would probably put under the umbrella of the enabling policy environment. And I think when we talk about European leadership, I think leadership means different things to different people at different times. And I think it's meaning more and more inclusive leadership. So how this works at indeed a global level. And one thing I haven't heard spoken of yet, and maybe we will later, but I think an issue which is emerging to be a defining factor in how society advances is we're speaking here about a digital transition, but the impact of regulation on digital transition. And we know about the obvious one, which is data provision, data privacy related regulation. And of course, the poster boy for that is the GDPR, but there are many others. And we need to look at that. But not only, we've got regulation emerging in clinical trials, in medical devices. And we know a medical device really is a computer inside you, sort of thing, as somebody said. So again, very much a symbol and symbolic of the what used to be called the information society, and I suppose now we call it the digital society. So regulation vastly important, and I want to encourage everybody to bear that in mind. Ian, you are very welcome. Again, please, the screen is yours. Everybody, we now have Professor Ian Jones in a pharma, and he will talk to us on his vision of skills agenda for Europe and beyond. Ian.
Thanks, Declan. Hopefully those slides will come up now in a second. Thanks very much for the opportunity to speak, and thanks to everyone for joining us this morning. I really enjoyed Sean's talk, and it's great to hear policy being formed, even at its early stage as it may be, around this topic. And it's already, you can see then with Matt, with an industry behind them, or with that context, how it applies to a really important sector like the biopharma sector in Europe and in Ireland, how it applies there, and perhaps how some of those sectors have been implementing 4.0 and considering how to implement 4.0 with the person at the core and with society at the core anyway. So I think they will be the industries that will show leadership also in terms of how this can be done in a fair and equitable way. So that is good. In terms of, I guess, what I'm going to talk about, it's pretty much just two things. It's kind of providing more context to why this is important in terms of the digital transformation of Europe and also at a global level, and some of the work we've been involved in there in an African context, but also to trying to provide some examples. And I have a colleague later on today, Noel Kelly, who will talk a little bit more about some of that digital lighthouse stuff that Matt was talking about, and to try and show examples of where to start. How can companies start this journey? And that points to shaping Horizon Europe calls over the next 7 years in terms of around these topics, because for all of the ambition that we will show as industry and manufacturing, there still are risks to making these changes. And the more we can show manufacturing examples and lighthouse initiatives of how this is possible and the road that was walked to get to the end to a successful digital transformation, the quicker that adoption will happen. And so the need for additional investment in technology research and implementation of that technology and the skills to go with that is key. And it is tangible, it is beneficial to society in a very quick way, an immediate way, in terms of outputs from that investment. In terms of who we are, we're in a pharma group, we're kind of a combination of both education, technology, and then additional niche technical services. And our role is to help industry and governments make that digital transformation with people at the core and ensure people have the right skills to make that transition into these high-tech manufacturing sectors, or if they're already there, to upskill within the sector. So that's kind of what we do. In terms of context for the digital transformation challenge, we've talked about it already, the environment, sustainability, climate change, whatever you want to call it, that is a driver. Competitiveness is a driver. Sean alluded to the fact, or referenced, that we are the home of Industry 1.0 with steam. Then with electricity, yeah, we still kind of led that. The third one, not really. From an American perspective, if you look at the top 20 companies in the Fortune 500, a lot of them are non-European, and a lot is transitioned out of here because it has been driven by internet companies and social media companies that have born out of Industry 3.0. And so with 4.0 is particularly the fact that it's about industry and how we make stuff in a more responsible and efficient way with people at the core. That's where we still want to show leadership, and we need to show leadership. There is a lack of human capital from operators and technicians up. That is an issue now. It will continue to be an issue. And that's all about not leaving anyone behind. It's in the skills agenda, digital skills agenda documents, and lots of European Commission documents, not leaving people behind. Well, if that's the case, we need to make sure people who want to work as an operator or a technician and progress their career, that they have the right skills. And a lot of that resides within the digital skills domain right now. For those non-believers, it is happening. 4.0 has happened. You're seeing it already in terms of cars, transitioning towards electric vehicles, smart automation, self-driving vehicles. On the social domain, it's dominating our world, perhaps too much so, but it is there. And that comes back to Declan's point, perhaps in terms of regulation. Maybe there needs to be there was a little bit too laissez-faire of an attitude in terms of the social revolution that happened. Maybe there needs to be a little bit more infrastructure and structure put in place in terms of the industrial revolution. So that's something we're thinking about. And in terms of ways of working, it's happening. We're all talking still from our living rooms or not from our offices, anyway. So we found ways to virtually connect, and that's what's happening and now. So the investment in technology and skills is critical now if we want to realize these changes within manufacturing in Europe and beyond, and show leadership in that space. In terms of President von der Leyen's digital decade ambition, that's over the next 10 years. She wants to see the digital transformation of Europe, particularly the manufacturing side of Europe, and with skills at the true north of that. That is the enabler, as well as your infrastructures and your technologies, but skills at the core. Talking about over 20 million ICT automation type specialists over the next 20 years, over the next 10 years, that's by 2030. So that's huge. And bear in mind, if we have 10 million people working in high-tech manufacturing and 34 million people working in manufacturing in general, of those 10 million, probably 3 million are their operator technician roles. They're entry-level roles for people with just secondary education that could start their career at that level. So this is really, and when we talk about a recovery, the transitioning people from declining sectors into these still successful and growing sectors, the provision of digital skills and high-tech manufacturing skills to successfully transition over is really, really important. So that this is not just about artificial intelligence, machine learning, data analytics, and all of those high-end computing type skill sets. It's not just about that. It's about a much broader base of people within the manufacturing sector in Europe and the globe that need basic digital skills to do their new job. And that's not only to help new people get into those jobs, but it's to help people already in those jobs stay competitive and stay relevant and not leave them behind. So I think it's worth underlining that fact, the scale that is impacted here. And I'm not going to dwell on this, but we all know in terms of Industry 4.0, where it fits in. And the real thing for me I would talk about is it is the coming together of that digital world, the physical world, and the virtual world. That's why it's so accelerated. It's everything coming together at the one time. And it's impacting everything. And then from how we discover medicines, how we discover stuff, to designing our factories, to the development and manufacturing of the medicines or the products, to the entire supply chain. Major disruption going to happen within supply chain in terms of how we ship stuff, how we move stuff, how we set up our supply chain networks. And for me, this slide is interesting because it breaks it down to a very digestible format, what the technologies are that we're talking about. And so we've got advanced analytics, AI. These are spaces that pharma are engaged in predominantly, smart automation, autonomous systems, Internet of Things on our technology side, a lot of that stuff. And what's really interesting is the first wave, they talk 2009, 2016, but certainly by 2020, we were using a lot of these things, where it's advanced analytics, cloud computing. And the second wave, we really are seeing a lot of that now in terms of AI, autonomous systems, blockchain, smart automation. And even already we're seeing a real emphasis on cybersecurity. So it's really interesting to see how these waves are actually happening. And I'd like to acknowledge Henrik von Schiele, who was one of the guys who's really driven that 4.0 concept over the last decade. He kind of has chunked it this way, has blocked it this way in terms of how it will impact industry and society. And just for those, if there's anyone on the call that isn't still a believer, the rate of obsolescence of companies has increased significantly. So if you go back before 1950 or so, the average age of a company was 60 odd years. Now it's less than 20 years. And then the final point is, if you go back 30 years from now, so it's 1991, first website, the first notebook, so the first laptop ever, and first type of antivirus software 30 years ago. So imagine how much has happened over that 30 years, where we're at now with our smartphones, etc., ambitions to go to Mars, and where we'll be 30 years from now. So the rate of adoption of these technologies is only going to increase, which is good because that gives us hope that we will achieve our sustainability targets and our industrial competitiveness ambitions. And we ensure that people still have great jobs in these sectors, so that they have a good life. And this is kind of just bring it home from a COVID perspective and beyond. We just did up the schematic to try and show from a factory perspective, to be resilient for the next COVID, we need to reduce the number of red areas. So that's where people are engaging with each other, have to be in the room at the same time, whether it's a lab or production, manufacturing environment, whether it's, lighter R&D or having your meetings or doing your quality assurance, your review of batch data. A lot of other services and supports can be outside of these rooms. And that's the technologies that go with Industry 4.0 enable that to happen. So those cloud-based systems, making those jobs safer, to Sean's point, in terms of where they work and how they work, but also more resilient. And also, an average factory might have 500 or 600 people. It doesn't mean you have to have 500 people getting in their cars every morning going to that factory to make stuff. We can reduce the carbon emissions linked to that factory from a commuting perspective by having this model. So that totally makes sense. And finally, in terms of in an African context, and we co-chaired a session last week on as part of an Africa EU summit on skills, but the point was made in terms of the ambition for Africa to make their own vaccines, to make more of their own medicines. That is becoming more and more possible in a scenario where the footprint and the skill sets that are needed to make the stuff reduces in the short term and can be supported by various global cloud-based services and expertise that can get real-time visualization of the data on the factory and on the machine, how it's going, to provide direction. So one of the blockers to medicine manufacturing in general in an African context would be the skill sets and the knowledge base that's there, the know-how to make it happen. But this scenario reduces that burden and makes it possible in a more accelerated way. In terms of Industry 5.0, Sean has summarized it much better than me, putting people at the core with an awareness and sensitivity to sustainability and resilience. And I like this slide because, we have our 2030 or 2050 ambitions from a climate perspective and goals to hit. And you can see here, three things I'm going to point out. Blue is the ambitions from a European perspective, and you'll see it at a national level as well in terms of power. The ambition to move from fossil-based fuels over to wind and solar energy, and that's one of the early wins. Second early win is transportation, the dark green, moving from your petrol and diesel engines to your electric engines, or reducing the transportation levels in general. Public transport, of course, increasing that. But the third one is this brown guy, brownie red guy, that's industry, that's us. So we are going to be called upon as part of that third wave and that third cohort to deliver on our sustainability promises. So it's not, the time is now to be thinking about this and thinking about sustainability. Second last slide. Noel will talk about this a little bit more, but this is, if you're a factory, if you're an industry, where do you start? You start at the beginning. So you determine, you baseline, you figure out where you are from a digital maturity perspective and a sustainability maturity perspective. So this is our scorecard that we spend 500 questions asking the leadership team and the experts within factories around these various topics, from how you make stuff, the primary chain, secondary chain, and then sustainability. We get a feel for where they are, help them set targets for where they want to be, and develop a roadmap, how to get there. So this is something that is replicable, across Europe for various sectors. And I think it's really important that we look at how we can implement these types of starting points and roadmaps for factories. Because if you talk to leadership teams, they say, we believe in digital transformation. We know it is a valuable role to play. We know our people need to get new skills. We know we need to get new technology, but we don't know where to start. So that's why we've developed this scorecard. So conclusions, we've talked about it, Sean and Matt and myself, and we need to show leadership. We need to be brave in terms of driving that Industry 4.0 and in the 5.0 movement. within manufacturing. And that's important because we need to show leaders how we can do it right in a global context. And that's important. It can drive that global recovery. It's not, we don't want to leave anyone behind. It does affect everyone. We've seen it, you know, millions and millions of people working in operator technician jobs will have and will be impacted by this digital transformation. We want to drive leadership and sustainability. We need investment though, and this is where Horizon Europe kicks in. We need to look at how we can respond and show leadership through the development of these lighthouse type factories across Europe for specific industries, specific products that we make. By doing that, we're reducing the risk for the other 99% of factories in that space and encouraging them to accelerate their adoption, showing them the roadmap to success for digital transformation. I think that's the role to play of Horizon Europe within this domain that we're talking about today, the investment in those lighthouse initiatives across Europe with a focus on the technology investment and the skills investment so that no one is left behind. But the time is now, we can't wait. We have to start spending money as part of a recovery and as part of that twin transition that we talked about. So thank you very much for your time. I hope I haven't gone on too much. I'm going to hand you back to Declan, and I welcome any questions. I'm happy to respond in the chat box as you go along.
Wonderful. Many thanks, Ian. That was superb, very comprehensive. And again, you made a lot of sense on these indeed complex and emerging issues. So this has been extremely valuable. I'd now like to call on Karina Angelieva, who is an advisor, rather the advisor to the Minister for Science and Education in Bulgaria. And Karina, you're very welcome. The screen is yours.
Thank you so much, Declan. I hope you hear me because the connection was not very stable. Sorry, my camera is a bit here on the side, but it doesn't matter. I think it's much more important to flag some important topics of further discussion. I think we all should, thanks to the Commission and to Jan for these wonderful presentations that put the context and the main challenges on the screen. Let me though fulfill what you described so far, and really, in my personal opinion, to share with you what we need to do on European level. I really also like to thank Matt Morgan, who said Europe can have the leadership. Yes, we can have the leadership, but I think we need a much more consistent approach. First and more important, what I want to fulfill the previous presenters is that the fact that too much the last 20 years we are shaking and confusing a bit between where to invest, in fundamental sciences or applied sciences. This led to a huge lack from motivation and specialists, and that's why we have now this what I wrote on my lack of human capital. Yeah, do we have a lack of human capital, or we have a lack of highly qualified human resources? On the one hand, and on the other, we have really a lack of specialists, of experts that maybe are with concrete skills in an area, but their profession is not recognized. Because what does it mean for the social recognition operator or technician or big data specialist? The recognition is missing, and this is because too often on European level or national level, through programming, to different strategies, we are reshifting the goals of the union. I believe that in the core of today's discussion about Industry 5.0 and the skills, it's very important to talk about the single market. And then to fulfill the single market, it's very important Europe to have a real holistic approach to skills. Because the last more than 5 years, we invested in more than 15 blueprints, alliances on skills. It's very important, but I do not see that we have, just one moment. I'm sorry. The blueprint alliances have been first established in 2015 and they're ongoing, but the point is that we do not have a coherent approach among them to share good or bad practices and to see where they find a holistic or inclusive approach on skills and where we have still to do more. What is also remarkable the last year that we are talking a lot for skills and Industry 5.0. We are talking for sustainable development goals and recently for the Green Deal. But in the same time, we are not going more into details. As the previous speakers said, where are the main areas we need to have a critical mass, a capacity of human capital in order to have these skills resources for the future. Because let's put the things into a context. Jan just said before me about these 3 waves, very important waves concerning our strategic competitiveness in Industry 5.0. I agree with this, but if we wait now, the second wave to finish and to concentrate everything for artificial intelligence, and then to start to think about specialists in bioinformatics, I do not think this will happen. But the reality is that the national authorities, the governments, they have the strategy of 4 years of planning and thinking. And what they consider is sometimes a waste of money. Why we should build a potential of human resources pool of top specialists in bioinformatics if this is not immediately produce applied technology or innovations for the industry. And this is where I think we can together, and today's seminar is important from this point of view, to call on the European Commission, to call on the European Parliament. I saw that we will have one very honorable MEP, fantastic woman, Maria Carvalho. It's very important that we call on the institutions and on the national governments to have a long-term strategies on skills. And in this context, really to see and to describe better to the national authorities why we should start from school education to higher education institutions and to revise the school education in view of fulfilling the sustainable development goals. Because at the end of the day, European Union, whatever we do, we can't fulfill this pool of critical mass of human resources only with ourselves. We have to work globally, we have to work with partners. Because now the brain drain is affecting, concerning highly qualified skills, it's affecting the periphery of the European Union, but it's also affecting Africa, it's also affecting parts of Latin America. And this is not helping then overall for the European Union, because anyhow, always the European Union have been a bit puzzled and confused between the competitiveness and the social policy, but this make us human. So to conclude on my first layer of integration, I really believe that we should stop this discussion where we should invest. Fundamental or applied science, we should invest in science, and we should remind ourselves that it's very important, especially now, taking the lessons from COVID-19, to revisit schools' curricula and to have really a holistic approach on science education. Secondly, it's very important to take stock what has been done so far, under European programs, ESF, Erasmus, Horizon, concerning, as I said, the skills alliances and different other good practices in order to construct better the next Erasmus course. I have to praise the Commission really on this very good achievement concerning the new course on VET Excellence Centers and of the skills alliances. But I do not think that we will find the inclusivity we are looking for. And I do not think that only through one funding instrument we will fulfill this European sovereignty or these gaps of skills in Europe that we have. The third very important fact that I want to raise here, and this is linked very much to COVID-19 and the health sector. Still, I think we are lagging behind concerning the health and medical sector, where concerning the industrial competitiveness, Europe has a lot to do. And here we need exponential resources of skills, but on different layers. We need top researchers, but we also need engineering minds. We also need data specialists. This means that we should talk about other things, and it's called a recognition of the professions. Because what does it mean, skills? You are doing some skills, but you should also be motivated for a career development. Your efforts of studying 10 years should be recognized and remunerated. And the differences in remuneration practices are still very big in different industries and between sectors, sorry, between countries. The other aspect I wanted to intervene, but I think I'm taking too much time, but I think it's important because I didn't hear it, but I think it's important. Let's remind ourselves, and I saw these statistics in the presentation of the Commission, about what the new millennium generation wants to see, what they are striving for in the future, about the jobs. And I saw they need mobility in their jobs. They need more freedom, more flexibility. Who doesn't need this? I think all of us, we need this. But we know that when we enter in a specific situation in life, we also need the security. And we can't build alone skills agenda without taking into consideration reforms in pension sector, in social security sector, transferability of pensions, if you want, which is not working overall with full coverage in the European Union. But we also, what I didn't see is, doesn't we want from the new, we don't want from the new generation, from the millennium generation, also to have a bigger percent of them to dream to have their own businesses. We need basically a generation that is ready to take the risk to create our businesses, jobs, and for this I think that a part, of course, of highly qualified education and science, we need creativity. We need to foster creativity, and we need to foster young people to take the risk, to probate different innovations. And dear participants, dear Declan and everyone, I don't want, of course, to provoke too much the audience, but for this we also need maybe to revise or to look very seriously into the applications, to the funding, to the evaluation procedures of the different European projects, because many newcomers, many young people, they have amazing creative ideas, but maybe they're not the best consultants or the best yet in these administrative operations. And don't you think that too much also on national level, sometimes we are bureaucratizing the whole process of innovations and we are cutting through the creativity. So I do not know if I have solutions today, but for sure one of my solutions is that on very high level, we need a skills forum. This is something that is missing from European level, and this is very important to call for a high level group on skills agenda, because we need to gather first all the information we have on one place and to see where we are and where we want to go. Secondly, we have to really call the member states to fulfill their engagements and to ask for their responses concerning schools agenda targeting sustainable development goals. We need to make a review what we are doing on national and local level. This is extremely important. Do you know why? Do we all understand what is Green Deal? What is digitalization? What is artificial intelligence? I'm not sure, and it is very important because the young generation is too much mobile. And we'll have inputs tomorrow from everywhere, from all the regions in Europe, but also beyond. So this is, for me, science, creativity, and better coordination on European level. Thank you, Declan.
Thank you very much, Karina, for those excellent recommendations, which we will look forward to bringing to reality, and indeed discussing in half an hour. So I hope you're able to stay with us. Now from Bulgaria, I'd like to go to South Africa and welcome Carla Sharp from the Square Kilometre Array Telescope Observatory. Carla, do you hear me?
Yes, I do.
You're
Hi
very
there.
welcome. Good morning, Carla. You're very welcome. Great to hear you.
Good morning. I realize it looks like I may be in Russia or somewhere. I am in fact in South Africa, but it's freezing.
Gosh, well, thanks for making the time.
Absolutely. So I would like to throw a little African perspective on this discussion. And of course, I work in the area of space sciences, so I've woven that in a little, which is why my title is A Sustainable Future, both on and off Earth, because we're always looking at both in my sector. I was very, sorry, I'm just struggling to move my slide. I was very excited to listen to the presentation on Industry 5.0. I love the new goals and areas of focus. And I think why I put this slide up here is in Africa, you have over 50 countries in various levels of industry revolutions. You know, the buzzword around Africa in economics is for Industry 4.0, and this is a target, but many countries are still sitting somewhere between 1 and 4, and it's frog because they don't have technology legacy, so it's easier to jump. We found that in South Africa in many areas, sectors such as banking, we have an exceptionally advanced banking system here, and that was because of not having legacy, and we were able to leapfrog. But then we have other sectors of our industry which is still sitting behind. So classifying ourselves within which level of industry is industry development is quite challenging. But 5.0, I think, is somewhere many countries could actually jump to. What I had wanted to highlight before that presentation is in these revolutions, there's a lack of compassion, collaboration, and creativity as a focus. And I take that back, having watched the presentation on 5.0. It's a lovely advance and step forward. And just an example, I included this slide to show Africa is really lagging behind in digital skills. And there are a number of areas where I'm obviously being generalized, but that we are lacking in technology. And I think a problem with for developing nations, and in particular Africa, is this chase for technology in itself as an end in itself. And I always try to point out that technology is just a tool. It's a tool that we use to realize our inspirations. And technology itself shouldn't be the goal in the end. And many countries in Africa and in the developing world look to developed nations, look at the technologies they've got, and based on the economic assumptions that technology drives economic growth, the chase becomes for technology, and the ultimate goals are not necessarily investments into science and technology in developing nations, and it often doesn't lead to sustainable solutions, this chase for technology. I thought I would just touch on space because I love space and it goes towards what I'm speaking on a little later. So there's two areas we interact with space. We either, the project I work for, we look at space from Earth. Essentially, these are the space sciences, astronomy, etc. And then we can look at Earth from space. And this would be satellites, Earth observation, and a use highlighted here at the bottom is disaster management. The picture on the left is what you're faced with in a flood on the ground, and the picture on the right is the information provided by space technology. So space technology is a wonderful tool for improvement. And mentioned before with the SDGs, pretty much all 17 of them can be addressed or aided in addressing in one way or another through space technology. So I work for, I think, probably the biggest space science project in the world, and definitely in Africa, the largest technology project, the Square Kilometer Array. It's an intergovernmental organization. It was founded by 12 international countries, South Africa and those outside of South Africa, outside of Africa. It is now hosted in South Africa and Australia. We have built the Meerkat telescope, one of the dishes you can see there on the right. It's situated in South Africa in a very remote area. And it is now the best telescope of its kind in the world, and it is producing groundbreaking science. So as South Africans, we are very proud. And some of the big successes in this technology project were, when we assessed them, we've been able to put them in this model, almost a science economy model. And the project began in the early 2000s. And originally it was outreach and awareness and interventions into education with a major focus on human capital development. Then we participated in what I call facilitated development in terms of facilitating industry in what we call localization. So this is where a country is importing technology and actually gets to the point where they're able to develop their own technology, manufacture that technology, and even turn it around that they are now exporting technology. And this has happened in areas through our project. And then you get to a point where you're actually able to innovate and commercialize. And this feeds in a loop that grows and strengthens. And this was originally focused on human capital development and building a pipeline of people in the sciences, engineering, etc. Over the first 10 years of the project and to date, we've awarded over 1,500 bursaries at various levels. We have schools intervention programs. I've mentioned before, there's a small town near our telescope that had, their high school had never produced a student with sufficient grades to attend university. And we supported the school with new teachers and various projects, robotics projects and challenges and etc. And now there are 15 students under our bursaries from that high school that are attending university. I'm the Africa Program Manager. So when we supported by 8 African countries, they are listed here, and we were committed to implement radio astronomy infrastructure in these countries. And so I manage the project that implements this technology, but we hit a stumbling block in resourcing, really. It's one thing to put a telescope into a developing country, but if they don't have the scientists to do science or the resourcing to manage or maintain or operate that telescope, it doesn't bring sufficient benefit to that country. So we've implemented a program called co-location, and this is a program whereby we have science infrastructure, such as a telescope dish and its associated computing. And we co-locate a satellite receiving ground station. And now the computing can be shared, the resources to manage both dishes and operate them can be shared, the cost of electricity, fiber, etc., can be shared. And we have done a pilot program in Ghana where we have the dish doing astronomy, and an industry participant has rented a site adjacent to the dish where they have implemented their satellite receiving ground station. So now the site is covered by the hosting fees. The staff are paid, the electricity is covered. They're combined in training and developing compute skills. Other industry is now able to participate in developing value-added solutions on data. Government has easier access to Earth observation data. And we've created this hub that speaks to revenue, etc. And so this is a new model that we hope to look at in Africa, which, for want of a better term, forgive me, but basically monetizing science. So science is a driver, and if you can co-locate and collaborate, whereby industry, academia, and government work together, we're able to create these sites that generate revenue, generate science, education opportunities, employment opportunities, and most importantly, innovation. So that in a nutshell is what I do. And I think a big challenge we have in Africa is, you know, if you have people without water and food and basic medical, and you try sell a science project, we need to go to space or build a satellite, it's very, very challenging. And often these projects have to be taken on by governments and driven entirely by governments. And we need to look at a new model where governments initiate, but then commercial entities and industry can participate to take these projects further. Step one should be government, but not the entire project, I think. And this we've successfully demonstrated with co-location, and we hope to develop these across Africa, particularly the 8 countries we partner with, these sites where government is an initiator, but then industry and academia can take these programs forward. And that's it. Sorry, I wasn't sure how much time I had, so I just sped through some items I wanted to touch on there. I hope that you found that relevant.
Thank you very much, Carla. No, absolutely relevant. And I thank you for that, because I think it sensitizes, as it were, us in Europe to the global dimension of many of the issues that we are considering today. And I think that's absolutely important. It will continue to be important. We've heard from Shauna Reagan earlier on and others on the relevance and importance of the SDGs. So I think that this common approach might be an exaggeration, but certainly learning from each other. And again, the idea of European leadership again has to be matched with other leadership. And I think there's African leadership. And of course, later this year, rather early next year, we will have the next EU-Africa summit, which happens every 3 years, you will know, and that might be a very good opportunity to look at key issues. And manufacturing and manufacturing processes certainly should be high on that agenda. We have had an enormous amount of visibility recently on the fact that Africa has probably 1% of the vaccine manufacturing capacity that it needs. So the only way is up there. Of course, that's a gross simplification, but a huge challenge there to build manufacturing. Certainly from the people around the screen this morning, you can see how elaborations and collaborations can be developed to deliver on global challenges where they exist. And of course, as you've alluded to, we have, I think, as a result of COVID, we have a much greater appreciation of the role and contribution of science to innovation and enabling innovation, and manufacturing has a huge part to play in that. So thanks indeed, Carla, for that very valuable perspective. I'd now like to turn to Dr. Corrado Perna, Corrado, do you hear me?
Yeah, I do. Can you hear
And
me?
Corrado, I'll ask you to stay to 5 minutes. We've had excellent presentations and we'll have excellent more, but we just need to respect people's time. So if you could please jump in, looking forward to your intervention, and the screen is yours. You're very welcome.
Thank you and good morning to everybody. Today here I'm just as a testimonial of how digital transition is already in progress, how it's fastly approaching the society and changing many domains of our daily life. And not only referring to the smart working, there's an experience that everybody is practicing now, but the way of engaging people and the way of engaging challenges that can be solved thanks to the digital tools. A few months ago at UN GA 75, we had a workshop. The institution that I represent, the Italian National Institute of Astrophysics, held a workshop to demonstrate the proof of concept of how fastly the digital transition is changing our way of engaging society. I show you just a few slides to show what I'm talking about. Okay, you can see here a slide of that is a screenshot of the workshop at the end that I was mentioning, and the concept is represented by this picture. The strange things that nebula that you see on left side of this picture, that looks like the COVID-19 virus. Instead, it's a simulation based on real observatory data of the explosion of a supernova, was used as a test bed to show how myself, that you see here portrayed in the virtual studio in my home, and a colleague of mine that developed that tree model, we're talking about the different proposition or about the physical theory beyond the phenomena of the supernova. My colleague that was based in Palermo and I was based in Rome had the chance to steer in this tree model in order to rotate, to zoom in, zoom out, in order to perform a discussion. The three models are available at the website that you see on the top of the slide. And this is just to show you how the way of doing science is changing, and now this is becoming something that is part of society. During the pandemic emergency, we thought this could be a way to engage students for outreaching proposals, and that's part of our experiment as a proof of concept. On the right side, you can see the scientist that is explaining in a virtual way to two students coming from different sides of the country the same physical phenomena. So what we realized in making this experiment is essentially it's completely changed the way to engage the stakeholders of our institutions. Scientists can make their own professional activities without traveling or minimizing the travel, but also can face challenging and testing proposition in a much faster way than it was possible in the past. And people can be reached in every area of the world, and is in a position to face directly the frontline challenging problem of science. But this is not part only for science. This is something that can easily apply to any kind of developing a projecting activity. Carla before was mentioning the SKA project. One of the goal, Italy is one of the main founding members of the project. One of the goals is trying to engage people from Africa in order to create a big environment for developing of this science. And well, we think that the digital transition can, for example, speed the development, because we can easily engage industries in the project phase, technical problems, find solutions in a much fast way. And just data to show you how it's changing the way of engaging people. My office is in charge of liaison with the industry, so I deal with many of the national manufacturers that are interested in dealing with the contracts for astronomy. Well, during the pandemic, thanks to the digital platform, I performed a total amount of public hearings of company interested to the astronomy that is equal to the total amount of hearings that we had face-to-face in 10 years. So this gives you the sense of how the digital transition can burst the economic development, and how it is fastly changing the way of approaching the problem. So the recommendation is that the policymakers have to face that the transition is in progress, is heavily in progress, is probably much forward than we are realizing, because this kind of transition happens daily. So the people doesn't realize that it's changing, because what the new way of working, the new way of approaching the challenges is transforming the daily life, and you don't realize that you are under a transition, and so you don't realize how far we have been, we achieved compared to the transition to society that was in the past. The example I did before of the public hearings that we were able to perform thanks to these digital tools, probably it's a trivial daily example of how we were forced, for example, to change our engaging strategy and policy strategy for the stakeholders of the project. But at the end, we had the chance to maximize the number of inputs, to maximize the numbers of possible solution and of capabilities that probably will never be in a position to discover any country without this way of working. So recommendations that is to take into account that the transition is in place, the transition is moving fastly, that the society is embedding this transition as part of its own way of working, and so recommendations that to note this and to set up all the possible tools that can help to maximize and this transition for the benefit of the society. Declan, we can hear you.
Declan, you're on mute.
Declan, you're muted.
No, can't hear you, Declan. Corrado, thanks very much. That was really good.
We're back. Just this mic went. Thanks very much, Corrado. And I guess people can visit the link and see this in action. So we'll share that later. So thanks indeed. And now turn to Francisco Colomar, who has many hats, but he's here for one of them, which is his role as chair of the ERIC Forum. We've heard much today about data. We've heard a lot about Horizon. And, you know, as part of that, we will know that the European Union, through the Framework Programme and other instruments, has placed a lot of emphasis on science capacity building to deliver innovation. And ERIC, you will all know, stands for European Research Infrastructure Consortium. And this is the constellation of research infrastructures, which have many different, come in many different flavors. So looking forward to hearing about this. Paco, over to you.
Thank you very much, Declan. Thank you for the invitation. This has already been a very interesting day today. I like to bring maybe the perspective of research infrastructures and the role that it has to incorporate into this evolution that is Industry 5.0. So, well, it's been mentioned, and I think it's clear the importance of research and basic science, and that in research infrastructures happens as we are repositories of knowledge, and repositories of talent as well. I mean, most people working in research infrastructures are smart people and also very engaged people. I can promise I am very engaged. I'm not, I don't know if I'm so smart, but in any case, it's true that these teams are extremely useful and recognized hubs of innovation. And as Declan said, I mean, for the case of astronomy in particular, that is where JIVE, the institute I work on, is, and very much related to what Carla has just said before. Well, there have been lots of applications of the basic research of astronomy into many of the societal challenges in medicine, in cameras, high-tech cameras, in software, in even Wi-Fi was invented in an astronomical observatory. So I think in that sense, well, for example, also the big astronomy projects like the BLBI networks and soon the SKA are users of the big internet networks, which means that are also promoting the capacity building around many areas of the world, both human capacity, but also other kinds of capacity buildings. One aspect that I think it is to note in the context of Industry 5.0 is how research infrastructures offer access to industry as well, to teams for innovation, and access to this very specialized, complex and often expensive equipment. So in that sense, I think it's very important to visualize and put the research infrastructures in the dialogue that has to happen in this evolution of Industry 5.0. I think it's been mentioned, and it is true, the skills that are going to be needed, and how young generations, and not only young generations, every generation is going to be continuously getting new skills as the society is transforming. And in that sense, research infrastructures have always played a very important role. Carla gave beautiful examples with SKA, with the ABN, specifically for small or developing countries where the international, the pan-European concept of a research infrastructure usually brings this community seen much easily that if things have to be done from the bottom and from scratch. So this is a societal value that we can bring in, the dissemination of this concept of importance of research and basic science, the awareness of science, but also the diplomacy. I mean, diplomacy meaning because pan-European and global international research infrastructures have always been an attractor of these talented people, but then everything that goes after that, even in the worst times of other relations between the societies. For the ERIC Forum itself, well, we are 22 research infrastructures and growing in the areas of health, environment, energy, physics, and social sciences. The next speaker, Juanmi, will talk about LifeWatch, which is one of our important research infrastructures in environment. And for JIVE, I would say in particular, which is one of the physics, that it has contributed essentially to, well, JIVE runs, let me say, a network of 22 radio telescopes spread around the world, and they send the data to the Netherlands where it is processed, and we have the user support. And it has contributed to big data, software developments, and also related to the technology that is needed to synchronize signals at large distances. Many of these things are of application in different areas. Just to finish, I would conclude saying that the collaboration in research and innovation from public sector, private sector, research infrastructures, industry has a big potential, and I look forward for the rest of the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paco. And indeed, I think that final point is very central to the discussion this morning. Thank you indeed. I would now like to go to Juan Miguel González Aranda in Seville in Spain, who is the Chief Technology Officer at the LifeWatch ERIC Research Infrastructure for Biodiversity and Ecosystems Services. Juan Miguel, the screen is yours.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for this invitation. And I guess you can see the screen, yes, right now.
Yes.
So, my presentation, thank you very much for this invitation. As innovation skills, above all skills, and Industry 5.0 is extremely important in support of advancing the green revolution and economic recovery through research infrastructures, like what ERIC. This E means two things: electronic, ICT, digitalization, and enhanced infrastructure, as you have been mentioned, because research infrastructure, as Paco Colomer, hello, Paco, are very important to guarantee the structurability and the sustainability of what we are doing from the point of view of research and innovation. That is more than clear. And Industry 5.0, the involvement of industry is essential in this regard. So, the ecosystem services cascade, from biodiversity to human well-being. All of us are living in ecosystem, natural ecosystem. The green recovery, the recovery from coronavirus 19 disease, is obviously based because bad practices have been applied to the ecosystem. Independently, if the virus is coming from the nature or coming from a laboratory, virus is a living being, and the bad practice create this situation we are facing. And in order to avoid that, it's very important to know the ecosystem functions to provide the proper ecosystem sustainable services for the benefit of the human being. And not only because there exists a very nice TEV, new economics of ecosystem and biodiversity, circular economy. No, not only because that, because we need to understand the environmental limits, the resilience of the ecosystems in order to provide, as I said before, the proper sustainable ecosystem services for the preservation of our ecosystem, of our living on the earth. So don't get scared because of this graph, this slide, but you can see here that Sustainable Development Goals were not created only for themselves, but to guarantee the human well-being based on understanding of the nature and applying those sustainable ecosystem services based on data, on business data, data mining and intelligence. That is the reason we have identified 12 key ecosystem services. And according to food provision, water provision, raw materials, till recreation, cultural, spiritual, air quality, how we can guarantee the accomplishment of those sustainable development goals for the sake of all of us, based on data-intensive science, to be guaranteed by providing the proper research infrastructure. On the contrary, when the project ends, the initiative is over, and we need to guarantee the proper research infrastructure. And from the point of view, that is like what ERIC about. Why? Because going to the point to the digitizing European industry, Industry 4.0, and the evolution towards the 5.0, it is extremely important. And that's why I love so much the presentation made by Ian Jones previously on the importance of the skills or and the connections with the digital innovation hubs, the platforms, and the regulation of all of them. At the same time, we're paving the way for the new Industry 5.0 that enhances technology to accomplish these overall objectives. Why? Because in parallel, the European Union has invested a lot of efforts on the Green Deal. If we put together with the previous slide, we can check that the research infrastructures are in the center of the quadruple helix, where academic companies, data and ICT providers, training, skills are essential to guarantee that new creation of green employment, as previously mentioned by Karina and Gelieva as well. That is very important. that in a digital innovation ecosystem where all companies, including in particular the European small and medium companies, can have their own floor to develop this new recovery after the pandemic. In fact, and in order to achieve sustainable development goals, we need to guarantee a low carbon, resource efficient, and climate resilient future in line with the Paris Agreement. So that to guarantee those healthy ecosystems, this is a loop, in a socially sustainable way, innovation is key. The evolution from Industry 4.0 towards Industry 5.0, model based on circular economy with sustainable and fair value chains being the key for the transition and sustainable economic model. This is obvious, but our step contribution forward, as Paco Colomer said, is that scientific and technology knowledge is also essential in regards to the key role of research infrastructures. Infrastructure, if we go to the dictionary, infrastructure is something to be preserved, to provide service to the rest, to be that container repository, as he said, Paco said, to have all the data, but also the tacit knowledge created. So, therefore, we need to create an ecosystem-based approach where policymaking, institutional processes, society capacitation, skills, and economic system guarantee the ecosystem and natural resource management in a sustainable way. And that is like what's about. Like what Eric is about the research infrastructure, the European science distributed infrastructure, focus on how to measure the impact of global climate change issues on earth biodiversity and ecosystem research, which impact is to be a structuring tool for the European research area to provide support to decision-making and citizen science activities. We are an ERIC. I will not go in detail what is an ERIC. Paco told before. And these are the members here that are composing a main triangle by the Netherlands, Italy, and Spain as the main premises, and then the distributed premises. By the way, I'm very happy to announce you with the Karina Angelia permission that Bulgaria is going to be very soon, in a few days, new member of full member of Laiwacheric as well. Let me remark as well that for us it's very important the paradigm of Europe of the regions to guarantee the cultural heritage of every region, the different smart strategy for smart specialization as well, structural funds, resilient funds, and we are not working alone. We are working with a lot of sisters, such as Global Biodiversity Information Facility, Research Infrastructures, and brothers, Research Data Alliance, EMSO, Climate, and last but not least, and maybe one of the most outstanding, the European Open Science Club initiative. And not only that, as Paco said, we have an outstanding role in ERIC Forum in the Latin American Caribbean Partnership through Res Infra, and Brifer, this is the cluster for open science for environmental research infrastructures. Well, this is about Latin America. We have identified in Latin America of first priority. It's obvious, climate change and biodiversity. The 86% of meso and macro scale biodiversity is in Latin American Caribbean. And now, thanks so much, Declan, to you, we have been actively involved in the same process, successful, let's say, with Africa. So we are part of a very nice subgroup, Arab subgroup, to explore extensive synergies between Africa and Europe, science, technology, and innovation collaboration, in particular with the government of the Republic of South Africa, in regards to guarantee the consolidation of a partnership from green transition and energy access. I will not go to the conclusions of the G7 or the next COP27, stating that biodiversity is essential. And not only like what Eric, but also Jolie Jeviv, DISCO, ICDBIO, CETAF, Biodiversity Information Standard, TDWDG, worldwide, taxonomists, ecologists, limnologists, all of that together to guarantee the review based on the state of art of ICT technologies. Our colleague from South Africa said before that ICT by themselves is for nothing. I am agreeing 200% what she said. Of course, we need to guarantee that those tools are properly addressed, used by the users, and we're trying to do our best through two products. Tesseract Virtual Research Environment, the evolution of the GCube platform, that's what we are calling Tesseract. That is the joke, no, let's say, for the name. A live block that is our system of blockchain based on blockchain beyond the traceability aspects of the data, because we are also tokenizing the socioeconomics value of ecosystem services. Because I don't remember who from the previous speakers also said that we need to assign a economic value to the cooperation. On the contrary, it won't work. And that's why, like what Sherik is in the top on the global biodiversity informatics outlooks, where we are using data, sorry to insist on that, data intensive technologies to understand what is going on based on scientific evidence and in terms of the data and the culture of the data, the indigenous data culture, because if you don't consider the tacit aspects, the skills of the people, the psychological, emotional intelligence of the people the data are coming from, it will not work as well either. Sorry. And that's all. I'm finishing. A lot of colors. We love colors. Nature, a lot of colors. The bloom, magnificent bloom, spring bloom. Well, we are now in summer. And I will be finishing with a lot of species, a lot of diversity, and a lot of young people. Why young people? Because Ian, you know better than me, among others, that the future is now in the high schools, let's say, and the schools, primary and high schools. And we need to pave the way to guarantee the proper skills in this new green, not transition, but revolution through digitalization that we are doing in a collective way, more than from the European perspective, in a pan-European perspective. So I'm finishing telling, let's consider that future to guarantee, by guaranteeing also the transgenerational knowledge, the indigenous knowledge, and the clan. Thank you very much again. Gora Maheda. Again. Over to you. Thanks.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Robert.
Ian, over to you.
No, that was really good. Thanks, Wami, and connected it back. So we've gone from 5.0 in general to applications within the high-tech manufacturing sectors, be it biopharma, medtech, food tech, agri-food, to space, astronomy, physics, and back to food and biodiversity. Really good, and all with the purposes and the goal of developing digital skills to increase that base of knowledge, so that they can work in any roles. And that's the thing that strikes me when people have digital skills and also the transversal skills of understanding that data, telling stories around that data, communicating that story to other people. They can work anywhere. So I think the purposes of that research, those digital skills that we're talking about, have relevance and have longevity beyond just what machine you're working on or what sensor you're working on. So it's really important that we, that's a common thread, whether it is astronomy or biopharma or agri-food or biodiversity. It is all about understanding data, telling a story about data, relating to other people, either physically, in a meeting room together or virtually like this. They are all skills that will benefit people throughout their career. So really good. Who's next on our agenda?
We have two more speakers. We have Noel Kelly, and then we have Mei Ling Feng, who got up very early this morning to join us from California. So there she is. So perhaps we go to Noel, and just I think we have a grave omission to address in that we have not mentioned gender balance in all of our discussions this morning, and I just want to really seriously put that down there, because that is hugely, because without that we're not going to get very far. So really over to Noel. Noel, the screen is yours. Thank you very much.
Good morning. Good morning to everyone, and thanks to all the previous presenters for some very interesting content. My presentation is just to take you through a digital maturity and sustainability assessment project that we're working through here in Ireland as part of this Lighthouse Technologies Disruption Group that Matt referred to earlier, and Ian also referred to it as part of his discussion. Really, I just want to kind of give you a heads up with where we are right now. We have a cluster over here in Ireland made up of the small molecule manufacturers, a number of different technology companies, government agencies, of which MAT is one of them, and industry, and industry representative groups. The goal here is to really to start understanding where do you start on this whole Industry 5.0. And clearly the first place to start is to understand it, to educate ourselves, and then to assess ourselves and assess our companies against where they are in terms of the journey, and more importantly, where they want to get to in a real practical, pragmatic and doable type of way. So we have developed this digital maturity and sustainability assessment tool all around the Industry 4.0 and 5.0 concepts and technologies. It's all around to improve our understanding. It's to assist us in benchmarking. Very important to know where we are against each other, and as much benchmarking as possible. It does then obviously assist in formulating an evidence-based strategy rather than doing things piecemeal. It's around understanding where you are so you can formulate your strategy around your own unique situation in a particular company. From that, you can create your goals and your plans so that you can make impactful transformation. Equally then, we're looking within this cluster, we're looking to identify common areas, common themes for transformation improvements, areas where maybe we can collaborate more, where we can help one another, and where we can accelerate the rate of change within the industry here in Ireland and further afield across Europe. And then the final one is then where possible and feasible, sharing of best practices to improve the manufacturing of medicines. In terms of the model itself, we've developed this model based on best practice out there worldwide, based, as I said, on Industry 4 and Industry 5 areas. It's, as we do it at the moment, it's an assisted and guided self-assessment. So what that means is we get our SMEs to sit with the company's SMEs. We guide them through what the meaning of each of the different areas is, and then we do the assessment with them, but they ultimately make the assessment of themselves because they're much more knowledgeable of their own company and of their own situation. It is a holistic approach. We cover 3 main areas. We cover the primary supply chain, 4 areas within that. You can see them there, from manufacturing down to planning. And within that, there's 30 different concepts and technologies. We look at secondary supply chain. Very important one here is the people, culture, and skills, right down to the systems and interoperability, IT, etc. We look at 26 different specific concepts and technologies there. And then we look at sustainability, and we've had some really good inputs earlier around sustainability, and we all know how important and how challenging that is for us all. And again, we look at 3 areas there: energy, climate, and resource, and we look at 20 different concepts. What you see on the right is just a snapshot of some of the way that we parse up the information and data. The only other point I want to make on this slide is that the target that you see there is a target that's developed for each individual concept and technology and ultimately rolled up into an area by the companies themselves. And the key point there is that not all of the concepts and technologies are equally important to all of the organizations. So it's important for them to put in their own targets based on where they believe their priorities need to be in the medium to long term for that particular organization. In terms of the process, we start with awareness training with the leadership team, with the SMEs and the groups within the company. Very, very important. We then actually perform the assessment. Clearly, that's all done virtually at the moment, given the COVID situation, but we do that across numerous different SME to SME interactions to perform the assessment. We'll then take the information, we'll analyze it, we'll review it, and we'll feed that information back. We'll feed it back in 2 ways. It goes back to the organization themselves to give them their own individual snapshot of where they are and recommendations and roadmaps into where they can go to in the future. And secondly, we feed the assessment results into the anonymized data that we use for our benchmarking across the industry here in Ireland and ultimately further afield. In terms of the benchmarking, as I said here, you can see we do it both for the individual company, and then we'll benchmark the entire small molecule industry here in Ireland. And our goal as we move forward with this is that the future benchmarking will be European wide. So again, that gives us a good flavor of where we stand, and it can feed into the whole kind of transition journey for Ireland initially and for Europe overall in terms of this Industry 5.0. And finally here, I just want to talk about some of the results that we've been getting. The report does inform how a client can create a vision and write a digital strategy, identifies next steps, identifies opportunities. It provides insight into the employee skill sides, and we've had a lot of conversation around that, and everything revolves around the employees and how they interact and how they work with this whole transition to see how effective it can be. And that obviously brings out significant needs in terms of skills, training and engagement. We have been benchmarking then again the industry so that people understand where they are. And it is very interesting to see the variations that are there, but also the variations are positive in the sense that, you know, when you've got some companies better than others, you know, you can help them and assist them to understand what they need to do to get better, and they can help and assist one another for what they need to do to get better. And the engagement to date with the companies within our cluster has been extraordinarily positive. A big appetite, first of all, to understand, and then to understand what they can do to improve their competitiveness and sustainability. Because in all of the organizations we've dealt with today, the appetite and the need and the understanding of what needs to be done around competitiveness and sustainability is very apparent. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Noel. I guess for me, just the reason why I was happy to provide a forum for this also was, you know, we want to bring this back to tangible tangibility and impact and where to start. And I guess that's why I wanted to show this is in terms of where industry, where manufacturing sites are starting. This is it. You know, before you invest, you develop a strategy. You develop a strategy based on awareness of where you are right now and where you want to go to. So I just wanted to share with more people the concept and the benefits, I guess, of going on that digital transformation journey. So thanks, Noel, for that.
Absolutely, no, well said. And just Ian, following your comments there, just to say that's hugely valuable. But I would say this, wouldn't I? But that could really inform policymakers, and there should be a continuity. Yeah. And I just not with this exercise, but again, this is almost a cliche, but very often you find amazingly wonderful work being done like this, but it's not conveyed to policymakers. Now that is a simplification, and it's something that needs to be managed. However, I think in the world we live in, there can't be this dichotomy between excellence as practiced and future policymaking. They need to be in tandem. So I think I'd just like to emphasize that point.
That's a good point. Yeah.
So now we've heard a lot about the anthropocentric aspects of the issues at hand. So delighted to welcome Mei Lin at the People-Centered Internet in California. Mei Lin, please. And we are short on time, but I mean, I think we're into extra time. We won't go to penalties, but I think it's a very fruitful discussion this morning. So I'm happy to keep going as long as people can stand it. But as I said, very, very rich interventions. Mei Lin, please.
Yes, thank you, and really happy to be here. I'm delighted to also speak for gender mainstreaming, and thank you for having the last speaker be a woman. I co-founded the People-Centered Internet with Vince Cerf, and we've been convening the Digital Cooperation and Diplomacy Network. And I'm quite active in working with the UN, so I want to give a global perspective on what we've been talking about. Digital is becoming mainstream in every area, And in the 1990s, the major music studios disappeared. But here in the 2020s, we have Industry 5.0 riding the wave. It's not a revolution, it's the mainstream. But with COVID, everything has accelerated. What would have taken 5 years happened in 8 weeks. And education is going to be transformed in a profound ways. The industrial era of education is over, because digital can now allow anyone to reach in and be part of a globally connected network. So I felt it was useful to update you on what's been happening at the United Nations. We talk about the SDGs, but this is the context behind it. There is a UN roadmap for digital cooperation. But I want to point out that Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General, is the first electrical engineer to be UN Secretary General. That means nobody has to explain to him what digital is, and he has just been renewed for the next 5-year term. This roadmap is going to be widespread across everything the United Nations does. And I want to bring out these 3 words: connect, respect, and protect. The Digital Cooperation Roadmap, those are the 3 words that you need to remember so that all people can thrive. Here's a quick summary of the Digital Cooperation Roadmap. It's about achieving the SDG goals and how digital can achieve them, but while leaving no one behind. Narrowing the digital divides, and that means women, youth, vulnerable communities, indigenous languages that have been disappearing. We've got to stop that. The cultures have to learn to coexist in the world together. There are many harms to children that are underway. It's so many challenges to privacy. And so this reinforcement of what is happening at the UN is something to take note of as we move into Industry 5.0. That movement has to be accompanied by common measurements and common nomenclature, because for public and private money to flow, that means research money and private R&D, they want to know the impact. How do they know the impact without the common nomenclature, without measurement? This is going to be key. I'm really, really glad for the opportunity to potentially work with Juan Miguel on global open source models for how we could do this and share and learn from each other. And finally, I'll wrap up with the global opportunity and context. At our Digital Cooperation and Diplomacy, our last meeting in June, Bhaskar Chakravarti, who's the Dean of the Fletcher School at Tufts, shared with us a view of digital evolution. How much momentum is there as countries evolve? How evolved are they on this digital scale? This is my last and final slide, and it's not going to be easy to understand, but it's really worth following me. Oops. Digital momentum is increasing. This is the slide I was talking about. So on the left-hand side, how digitally evolved are the countries? On the bottom, how much momentum to increasing evolution is there? The thing, there's 4 quadrants. The standout quadrants are here, where they're both evolved as well as a lot of energy and momentum in evolving further. The breakout ones are ones who are starting to have more momentum and dynamism, and less dynamism on the left-hand side. The standout, as you can see, is China. And Industry 5.0 is an essential thing so that that standout doesn't stay alone, that more and more countries move towards the right. So with that, I'll stop sharing, and thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, Melin. Very, very, very interesting perceptions, and extreme gratitude for this global perspective, which I'm a fan of, but I do think it makes sense apart from me being a fan of it. Just really, Sean O'Regan, who launched us today, has to leave very shortly. So I just want to go back to him for some observations before we collectively thank him. Sean?
Yeah, thanks, Declan, and apologies, but these are busy times, and I'm being called to another seminar that's taking place today on industrial technology in the context of Horizon Europe. First of all, I'd like to thank all the speakers. It's been very stimulating. I think most importantly, it has made the link between what we're trying to achieve in policy terms at European level and things that are happening on the ground. And I think it's very encouraging to see that we're now beginning to sorry, my video didn't come on. My video blocked, I wonder, but anyway, I'll keep going.
I hear you well, Sean.
Yeah, great. And I think very interesting to know that things are happening on the ground, particularly with regard to lighthouse projects. And this is something certainly we need to look at to see how we can work with you to bring those to the European level. I think it's very positive to see that people are picking up on the fact that we need to go further than digital transformation in its pure form, that we need to now look at the implementation in the context of manufacturing and industry in general. And indeed, investment will be part of that. And in that regard, I would certainly encourage you to engage with the various fora at European level. I mentioned in my presentation the Conference on the Future of Europe. This is a totally bottom-up approach, driven by citizens. We are all citizens. We can all participate. It's happening at the moment. That is one way to get, and it's important that we get these messages in and inform citizens and let citizens know that this is their future and this is how they can have a good future. But I think also fora and structures that are set up at European level. I'm thinking of European technology platforms, particularly the platform on Manafuture, where we did discuss on a regular basis with the manufacturing industry. Do engage with that. In our area of industrial technologies, we are unique across the framework program in that we also dialogue in partnership with industry. We have two public-private partnerships going, one with the people in the process industries, very much focused on the sustainability aspect, and a second one called Made in Europe, which is focused at the manufacturing more widely. It is through them that we dialogue, and uniquely it gives the stakeholders an opportunity to guide, to give their input when it comes to developing work programs under Horizon Europe. And that is then taken forward in our discussion with member states through program committees. So I would encourage further dialogue. We all have the same goals that has been clarified today, and now it's a matter of us getting together and being the leaders. And I think, Ian, you concluded by saying, "Be brave. Now is the time," and I can only echo that. So with that, thank you, Declan, for the opportunity to participate in this event, and looking forward to it being the start of something rather than just a one-off event.
Thanks indeed, Sean, and I'll leave it to Ian to thank you formally for making this indeed event happen, which essentially was built around your graciousness and willing to come forward to this table to discuss. Ian?
Yeah, thanks, Sean. It is equally, you're being brave because you're the guy putting out new policy for people to provide feedback on. So that is we are grateful for you kind of exposing yourself in terms of for that feedback. I think people have been very supportive today. I think they've been quite constructive, and I do think hopefully we've shown you that projects are ongoing that are absolutely aligned with the Commission's vision for where Industry 5.0 should end up. So I'd like to thank you again for that. I'd like to thank all of the speakers today for some great participation, and I love the the breadth in terms of it's not just the making of the high-tech manufacturing, the high-tech stuff that we've talked about and where we kind of predominantly reside. It's about, you know, the impact of science, astronomy, as well, and also the agri-food, which we are quite passionate about as well. And all of that builds on technology advancement, but it also builds on the skills which increase that human capital to get for people to get great jobs in great industries that we really enjoy. That's what we're talking about. And I would like to thank everyone for being involved today. And I look forward to a follow-up perhaps after the summer. There will be a report published from this, which will be fed back into the commission. And we've had some really good recommendations from all speakers to be included within that report. So back to you, Declan.
No, indeed. So perhaps again, Sean, thank you so much. So at this point, could I suggest that we formally conclude, but this is the point where we'd be waiting in the lobby, getting a coffee before our taxis arrive, if it was a real meeting. So I'm going to stick around. I just, there's a couple of people there that really we could have a little bit of a chat. I said it's extra time. We won't go to penalties, but sorry for repeating that, but I think it works. So listen, thanks so much, Sean. Much gratitude, and we'll be in touch. So thanks indeed. So really, just by way of just dialoguing for a bit, we have Mamo. Mamo, do we still have you with us?
I think also, Declan, it's worth acknowledging Michelle made a good point that female speakers should have a greater profile next time. I know that we were down 2 female speakers that couldn't make it on the morning, which was unfortunate as well. But it's a fair point, Michelle. We absolutely should have balance.
No.
Yes. Declan, I'm there.
Mamo, just very good.
I listened to all, very educational, very also the PowerPoint, some of them are very, very good. I was very, I think it's very interesting what you're doing. How are we going to move from the physical world to the digital world? And are the problems, the challenges that we're not able to solve during the physical time, will we be able to use digital technology to be able to address them and solve them? And if we have to do that, what are the challenges, the problems, the difficulties that we faced in almost every sphere, in the space, in the sea, in the land, in the industry, in the manufacture, and in the services, in the agriculture, in all spheres? What did we face? And what were the challenges we're facing? And then how do we address them with the digital technology and the digital time? I think it's an important question. I would just want to suggest something to you. In the physical world, in the physical time, we had health challenges, right? Today, I heard that the Chinese have now eradicated malaria. But look what we have here in Africa, HIV, all the coronavirus now all over the world. We have all these problems. We have unemployment. We also have corruption. For example, 75 million Africans have to pay bribe to get essential services. What does it mean? We have governance crisis. So we have so many challenges. Unemployment, poverty, all right? Nature safety challenges. We have climate change, all these challenges, all the problems we faced in the physical time. Can we now find a way through technology to resolve them? Can we provide this function? If we do that, what must we do in terms of reconceptualization, conceptual framing, theoretical kind of reasoning? What should we do? I sincerely like you to really think about it. if we go for valuing price, all right, and valuing not all nature, humans, and so on, always we will have a challenge. If we go for profit, if we just go for just getting a few economic success here and there at the expense of social loss, and sociological loss, economic gain, if we have some disparity like that, trust me, we will not achieve anything. If we use digital technology to continue it like this, we'll have problem. So my suggestion is this: we need to economics through digital technology, and politics, current politics through digital technology, and sociology to researchology through digital technology. What do I mean by that? For example, economic success is not enough. It's good, but there must be also sociological, environmental, educational, other success. So when we validate, in other words, when we say an output, something gain, we should, in the gain, we should unify it, like Einstein did with space, matter, time, all right? All this energy, as he did it, we should also say the validation criteria for economic success is not sufficient just by making profit and achieving market advantage and commercial advantage. It must also be social advantage, social gain, environmental gain. If we don't do that, in other words, if we make economic advantage by creating carbon diets, a lot of problems like that, then we are actually losing, because we are making nature lose when we are making individuals who make the economy success. So is there any chance we can rethink the entire way by which we think economics, politics, all right, social relations, environmental relations, education relations, the entire way by which we reconceptualize them, reframe them, redesign them, re-engineer them, so that if we do something like that, then I think we will save, the digital technology will be a lifesaver. This new era will be lifesaver. The post-industrial revolution, the fifth industrial revolution, all these things, all the presentations made. I like you to also really, I just want to say this. I want a total new conceptual framing, an approach to make reintegrating a unified approach for gain, loss and gain. Don't make economic gain with social loss, environmental loss, and any other loss, health loss, anything. We should make it gain. So we should create a new validation criteria. That validation criteria has to be done. That is something we need to do. We also need to move away with digital technology. We should not create new crimes, cyber crimes, many of these things that in the digital time. Now, because of all this social media, everything you see, you would not believe the information that flows. A lot of it is false information. Also, some ethics also we need to do. Really moral intelligence we need to do, emotional intelligence, intellectual intelligence. We need also to unify this in a very systematic way. And the third one I want to say is, I really think that we should also try to find a way where we do not use, we also try to create one humanity. Because look at the coronavirus. It affects the whole world. Look at climate change. It affects the whole world. So we should create a way by which we could also make the entire world was one community. So let's not go for selfishness and then create weapons, killers, nuclear things. We need to get out of the military industrial complex. We should create the humanity, lifesaver, world saver complex with this digital technology. Move away from that. No killing, nothing like that. On that side also we should move. So I really like if you a humanizing approach, a completely environmentally secure approach, nature safety approach, and social security approach, social solidarity approach, social justice approach, and a total innovation system, which I call social innovation, social entrepreneurship, and entirely by which no one can be poor or hungry. And we make sure that we manage the digital, with digital technologies, the demographic explosion, we manage the natural, the environmental insecurity, and we manage the coronavirus, and we manage all this globally together. So Europe should play a big role. No, you have many things, the infrastructure you have. So I really, really like to advise you to collaborate with all in a very collaborative way, to go together, march together, work together, all right? Know the world together. And I think, and deliver the quality services that we need to do. That's just my reflection from all the thoughts that you really very good. It's a wonderful presentations, and I learned a lot. I listened to all of you very carefully, took a lot of notes. I hope you can send us also your PowerPoints. And I just, I really appreciate that we need to do much more collaboration in a very systematic way, in a new way, with a new logic and a new approach and in a new paradigm and a new mindset. That's what I suggest. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mahmoud. Thank you. Ian, what's your reaction to that?
I think that was brilliant. To Mei Lin's point, which you put in the comments, yeah, there's a real risk that, you know, we'll have a few digital masters and many digitally unempowered, non-digitally skilled people. And there's a real risk to that. And there's even a greater risk now as part of a recovery that the good do better and the people who didn't do great are going to do worse. So the need is even more now in terms of being socially fair, in terms of how we impart digital skills. Like I think that's we need to ensure everyone has access. And this is why well, I know Sean is making the point, and other people make the point that it's beholden on the industry to make sure all people have the right skills to work in their factory. It might be, but it's also beholden of the government to ensure their citizens have the right skills, digital skills, to a good life wherever they want to work. So for me, it is a government responsibility as well to ensure that those skills are funded, and that everyone, wherever your background is, that you have the right to access those skills. You don't have to go 3,000 miles to a university lecture room anymore to get those skills. They're accessible through your phone. So the cost of actually accessing has reduced. Therefore, the cost of delivery will come down. But who is ultimately going to fund that access to those skills? I think governments still need to take a level of responsibility for that, as well as, of course, industry for their employees to ensure that they have the right skills to remain digitally relevant in terms of their skills. But I think that was a really good summation of and maybe a re-steering of our workshop as well, in terms of the global relevance. And at a European level, we need to show leadership. We have the connectivity, we have the infrastructure, we have the equipment, and we have a lot of the skills. We need to show what's possible with that now, and not only in a European context but a global context.
Very good, Ian. And just as you speak there, and you emphasize the role of governments, and I think this is of course important, but I think in a, and forgive the cliche, post-pandemic world, I think the role of multilateral bodies and fora potentially are more important than they've ever been, because again, if you take a small country, you know, a Luxembourg, Portugal, Ireland, even, I mean, you know, obviously wonderful countries, but, you know, the ability of smaller nations, and indeed less developed nations, to do the things you've suggested is in fact quite limited, never mind the issue of regulation. So I think we've got to potentially, you know, recognize that this is a global discussion. How's that for a cliche? But how then do you do this at global level? So if we're talking about optimizing manufacturing, for example, you know, Industry 5.0, and as we've been doing, can you isolate that geographically? I'm not sure if you can. I think it's truly global. And I know that you've been stimulating a discussion around the role of multilateral fora, including the World Bank and the IMF. And if you look at these bodies, There are banking and financing institutions, but very recently, if you look at their strategies, they're now talking about skills. They're talking about upskilling. They're talking about data. They're talking about an enabling environment at global level. So their agenda has become one of recognizing that it's not sufficient to talk about financing whatever. You need to talk about financing skills. You need to talk about financing the environment. You need to talk about financing the challenges we face, and that is very much a collective exercise. So I think there's a wider context that I think Mamo has helped us reflect on today. So I think we have to be very, as you say earlier, I mean, focus practically, but I think that focus then has to be a multi-focus, yeah, and a multi-application. And I know Mei Lin has given this a lot of thought in her work, recently in engagement with many of the multilateral forum as well. So Mei Lin, you might have something to add to that. I think we're just trying to frame the discussion. I think going forward, the output of this report, I think, yes, has to be very focused, but I think there's still a lot of work to be done in informing, educating, advancing into the policymaking sphere. But my point is that policymaking sphere is now a global one. And when I say that, I also recognize and know very well that there is no global regulatory body. There isn't, doesn't exist. So here we are talking about global challenges and global responses, which I think we have to do. But so who does the response? What, who do you call? And I think that's a challenge we have to recognize. And I think we've spoken today about European Union leadership, and I think that's fantastic. And I think there's leadership certainly in Africa. But I mean, how do you bring them together?
Hi. So I wanted to share my paper, which I just wrote yesterday. So it's very apropos. But what Mamo said was everything that I was thinking I was trying to elaborate on in the paper about how I connected. But now we have to make sure that we go to flourishing and not fury. The whole point of digital humanism as a counterweight to digital colonization driven by profit, this sentence here. This is,
very, very good.
We have to make sure we don't do that. Okay.
I'm downloading it now, Maylin.
Thank you. Can you should send it to us. We need.
It's there.
That was very good.
In the chat.
Yeah.
Mamo, when you said it, I thought, oh, he's talking, he's giving the speech for my paper.
Thank you so much.
That's
amazing. Yeah.
Well, no, listen, everybody, that's a terrifically inspiring note and food for thought note to conclude on, if Ian agrees.
Yeah, that was really good. The taxi has arrived.
Yeah, and indeed, and we're almost into penalties. So,
you love that.
Again,
you love that cliche.
I do actually. Yeah, no, I'm going to reach for that a lot more. Sorry, everybody. I'm not even a football fan, but just it's yeah. But no, as I think as Ian and Sean said, this is the beginning of what will be a very, very stimulating conversation. And as Ian said, we'll produce a report from this. And just, in the interest of transparency, I'm going to be using the wonders of AI to produce a transcript of this. And we share that with the key speakers, and then we'll come to a consensus paper. But that process does mean we have something very, very rich, very, very informative, and I think very interesting for policymakers. And as Ian said, we'll come back in September to continue this in very much in tandem with the policymaking agenda.
Yeah, perhaps Declan is part of the UN General Assembly in September. Is that September or October?
It's September. It's September. Yeah, beginning on Tuesday, 14. No,
that could be timely.
Yeah, no, yeah, absolutely timely. No, indeed, yeah. Couldn't have said better myself. Yeah, good. Okay. Well, that's everybody. That's a date. So thank you all so much. Stay very well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Declan.
Thanks indeed. We've got Paco and
thank you so much.
And Corrado and No. Next time, Ian, we're going to put No up the agenda. That was great. I like that. That was terrific. I think that that needs more time. That's even a meeting itself, because it brought an enormous amount of granularity to what we were discussing. So I really felt now that was very, very good. So thanks to all. Everybody stay very well. See you again soon. Stay safe.
Thank you for moderating. Bye-bye.
Cheerio. Bye.
Thank you. Declan, thank you so much.
Thank you,
You're doing great work. Keep strong.
Keep the faith.
We are wonderful.
Cheerio.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
thank you. You're
Bye-bye.
great. Thank you so much. You're inspirational.